This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we are live on the air with German stoner rock grunge band Tape Shapes, and we're glad to have you on the program. We've been a podcaster since 2018. We were originally on Spotify and Apple, and we're still there, but we started to do these YouTube and Facebook video podcasts, so we're glad to welcome you onto the show.
Thank you for having us. We're really happy to be here.
Yeah, it's just cool during the lockdown to have the video podcast, because then we get to actually see the people we talk to. So what we like to do is we like to show the work of the band. And on the audio podcast, we couldn't do that. But now, because we're on the video podcast, we can show YouTube videos. And we have queued up Tape Shapes Flesh and Bone official music video. So we're going to go into this. And then after we show it, we'll go and talk to you about like your band and all the details of how you create music. But we just wanted to be able to, tell everybody what we're doing here. We're going to go into the video, and hopefully everybody will be able to see it. And we're going to mute your mic, and then we'll catch you back after the video.
Great.
So that was Tape Shapes, Flesh and Bones official video, and now we're getting back to the podcast. So you're there, right? yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, you always want to make sure when you hit the button it works. So what's cool is, like I said, I love to be able to show the work of a band, because it's like when you're talking about it, it's cool to talk about it, from an audio perspective. But when you actually can see the work of a band, it's pretty cool. And you've got that kind of punk aesthetic, which is interesting because, I'm an electronic musician, but I've always had this kind of punk aesthetic. I like the Clash, I like Acoustica Duo, I like the Replacements, Sex Pistols, Ramones. I'm a child of the 70s. I'm in my 50s. So I grew up with like Zeppelin and Hendrix, and then I liked what happened with punk. It was kind of like the rebellion against that. And grunge, and I've always tried to put like a Trent Reznor edge into my electronic music. So I appreciate like bands that have that kind of edge that you have.
Yeah, thanks. We were all more or less born on the 80s, 86, 87. I think Elena's from 90. But we all grew up with music from the 70s, like Led Zeppelin and all that bands. And then I think we have a lot of influences from that time, and also from grunge era. Like all the 90s were a big impact for us because we lived through it a lot.
Yeah, so you like Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Stone Temple Pilots.
All of that.
Yeah, well, I think it was Soundgarden. He's like, what I loved about Kurt Cobain is he kind of rescued us from like the LA hair band scene. Because like Rat and Poison and Motley Crue, not that those bands are good. I mean, Guns N' Roses is probably the best of all of those. They're still like vital. Guns N' Roses came out of that scene, and they were kind of like Zeppelin or AC/DC, Aerosmith. They're still really big. But Nirvana, what was cool about it is like Kurt brought this kind of like Lennon McCartney kind of writing to grunge, that you could be very serious about what you wrote about, and you're not just stuck with like punk like the Ramones. You could go different directions. I mean, he'd use Beatle chords. He'd do acoustic performances. And so I think that just opened up that you can do a lot more within grunge and punk, that you can actually express yourself, as much as any singer-songwriter.
Yeah, totally. I think for musicians like us, grunge is a big influence because also, I mean, grunge was created in Seattle in the United States, and we don't have many bands in this style here, and we didn't have them on the 90s. We were still doing a lot of punk rock and roll, hard rock mostly, at least in Spain, where I came from Barcelona. And in Germany, I think more or less they were also in this kind of more hard rock vibe. So we looked up to this type of band like Stone Temple Pilots, Pearl Jam, Nirvana a lot.
Yeah.
You could see this difference, like not so much symphonic rock or not super perfectionist rock like Led Zeppelin, but also not the easiest 1, 2, 3, 4 Ramones.
Yeah, it's a kind of hybrid in between. Like there's this. It's like not exactly Jimmy Page or Eric Clapton or Duane Allman. It's not going to that level, but it is more than like the Ramones. It's more than like it's not just like the Sex Pistols, which was simplistic. And the whole point, I think, of that type of rock was, not everybody's going to be Jimmy Page. Not everybody could be Hendrix. Not everybody can have that kind of musicianship, but you still have ideas. And maybe it's cool to just be able to go out there and be honest, right? Kind of have your heart on your sleeve and just, I want to play music. I feel rock, but I'm not going to be Jimmy Page. I don't have that kind of level of musicianship, but I believe in rock. I believe in that kind of music, and I want to do it. And I think that's what's cool about grunge and punk is it gives people the fans can look at that and say, maybe I could do that. Maybe if I put my heart into it, maybe I could actually do that, and they kind of feel it.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was a type of music that was also very emotional and lyrics wise also very introvert and trying to take out all of this, all those feelings, and not just talking about a lost love or something
Yeah, it's
like
not just
my life.
Motown. But the
Yeah,
thing about a lot of popular music, whether it's Motown or even today's pop, is like I lost my girl or I lost my guy and I got to get him back. And it's like, okay, that's what it's about. But what's cool about grunge is it kind of takes, if you think about it, I'm a big fan of like Lou Reed in the Velvet Underground and Dylan. And I liked about those two artists is they decided that they weren't just going to talk about love songs, right? That they could talk about anything. And I think like all singer songwriters, no matter what genre, kind of look to like guys like Lou Reed and Dylan to like, okay, we can actually say things, even Bowie. Like we don't have to just talk about love. We can talk about other things. And I think that's kind of opens up all genres.
yeah, exactly. I think they were also talking a lot about mental problems, addictions, and things that not they were not. We haven't heard that a lot in many songs, or at least not
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
clearly.
Not in popular music. I think grunge was able to kind of take what the Velvets. I mean, the Velvets had heroin. That was like that was in the '60s. They talked about addiction. They talked about sex in different ways that were not part of the popular culture. And they went to the dark places in New York City. Andy Warhol, and Lou Reed were talking about all these kind of scenes in New York that weren't like the happy scene you get or the love scene you get. It was like, okay, this is what reality is. This is addiction. This is, people who are doing, strange things in the night. And I think that punk music and alternative music kind of went back and looked at what the Velvets were doing. And everybody says like nobody really bought the Velvet Underground albums except tons of musicians. And they, for every buddy that listened to it, they actually started a band. That's the rumor. But yeah, I think it's cool that you're coming from that perspective, especially in today's world with DJs and EDM. And I'm part of that electronic scene, but I try to go back to like Yes and Genesis. Electronic music to me is more like when you see Keith Emerson, or you see Genesis, or you see Pink Floyd. That's the type of electronic music that I'm kind of coming from, not like the DJ CDJ kind of version.
Sure.
But it's cool to see a band like you, they actually play it, because so many artists today, they actually are up there with like, music, I don't know, not producers, but like, like guys who are running all these sequencers and stuff, and it's not really live. And just to see a band actually playing instruments and singing and doing it like in the 70s and the 60s and the 80s, that's really inspiring to me, because I like that when I go out to see music, I just don't want to see somebody playing a box. I want to see somebody actually playing.
Yeah, actually, that's the most fun part of being in a band, the live concert. I mean, we leave from concert to concert. We rehearse a lot, but the best part is being in a festival or even in seeing your friends, new people, whatever, and just this adrenaline and the energy that creates in between the band, like the members, and you look at
Yeah,
to each other. This is the best moment in life that you can achieve. So yeah.
I think the dynamic, like I'm in my 50s, right? I started music because I started listening to Zeppelin, right? And I was like, well, I don't know if I could be like that. So my brother picked up a guitar. I had a best friend that was a drummer. We created a garage basement band, and we were watching MTV, but we were like, seeing the Clash, seeing like Television, Joy Division, early New Order, and we're like, whoa, we want to do that. And so I got into it. And we were just like, we want to be like what we saw on TV. And so we just got into it, and the joy of playing, everybody's just hanging out. But I think like musicians, we just like to feed off of each other, and the audience.
It's good to have a good scene. I mean, I don't know how it is where you live. In which city do you live?
Well, I live in New Hampshire, so there's no scene here. I have to go to Boston and New York.
Oh yeah.
But I live in the Northeast, but I live in the middle of the woods. So there's
Okay.
no scene in the woods. But if I go to Boston or I go to New York, I can play. But because of lockdown, I just mostly do online stuff. But yeah, when things are good, I get to go to New York and stuff. But yeah, there's a big scene in New York. Everybody knows that, like the CBGB type of thing. They're not as round as much, but there are places where you can, play 300, 400 people. And what's cool about New York is you go there and there's all these music critics, there are bloggers, there's other musicians. It's a really cool scene. You can get into pretty much like anything you want to get into. So I think I understand what you're saying. It's like in Germany, like Berlin. Where do you guys play? Berlin or the other cities?
Hamburg.
Hamburg. So it's a really good scene in Hamburg.
That's that's a really good scene here, and there's a lot of clubs. I mean, I hope they will still be open when the corona is gone.
Yeah.
Because I guess they are all going through some hard times now.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of places and a lot of bands. And if you are a band in Germany and you want to do a tour, there's a lot of clubs. Many cities have this, at least the vibe that we're playing now, like more into grunge, a little bit stoner. This alternative or metal. There's a lot of bands like this,
Because Hamburg is like where the Beatles started, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so it's cool you still have that scene, and also it's like interesting because a lot of times people think about Germany, they think about like Brian Eno and Bowie, when they did like Low and Fame and all these like experimental electronic and like Kraftwerk. Like being an electronic musician, like Berlin has been a focus because I like Kraftwerk and how Prince was inspired by Kraftwerk. Like a lot of synth bands, a lot of the new romantic era were all like inspired by the German band Kraftwerk, which was like very cutting edge. In the 70s, they were like ahead of the curve on that, and it's always been kind of in the scene from my understanding. And I've actually interviewed bands from Berlin that are really that scene, electronic scene is still there, like the modular Eurorack analog synth type of thing going on. But yeah, it's cool that in Hamburg you've got this rock scene, this grunge scene that I wasn't as familiar with that, so that's pretty cool.
Compared to Berlin, but it's true that they think that you have a lot of electronic bands and a lot of electronic scene going on. But if you go anywhere else in Germany, I think you will find more
rock.
This more rock scene, for sure.
That's cool.
More metal, more punk, but in between those genres, everything.
Like I said, I love the punk aesthetic because that's something I've been really into. Because I think what happens is that I try to get heavy metal type of sounds into my electronic, like the way Trent Reznor does with Nine Inch Nails. And sometimes my music has been compared to that in some aspects, but I think it's cool to use synthesizers to be aggressive and not just use them for melody, not just use them for beats. I think you can actually give them a punk grunge edge that you can do that. And it's not a lot of people go that way. I mean, you guys like Trent Reznor do that. And you get some other like electronic bands, like more like indie bands that will do that. But industrial type bands will go that way. But I want to kind of get into like when you first got into music, because you're the lead singer of the band, and like just try to get a little history on you. Like, so when did you first get into music, and like what age, and did you start liking rock, or did you start from somewhere else?
I come from a family. My father is a really hot 70s psychedelic rock lover.
Mm-hmm.
So everything from Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Beatles, all this music is what I was listening at home. And I remember being like 2 or 3 years old and listening to these records on vinyl in my living room and my father singing to it. So that was the first music that I heard. And then when I was growing up, I got into more like punk and hard rock. Then the grunge era was really the biggest thing for me. I think I got really into this, and I have a lot of CDs and tapes from those bands from that time. And I started singing when I was a kid, and when I was 16, I had my first cover band with all the music from that time. I don't know, it was like a mix from also like Led Zeppelin, then Red Hot Chili Peppers, then Nirvana and Blink-182 or Green Day. I don't know.
All good stuff. Yeah, that kind of reminds me when like I used to go to the record store, and during that grunge era, like I would just get everything from Sub Pop. Sub Pop
Yeah.
was the label that Nirvana and a lot of those bands started on. And then they got signed by the bigger labels. But Sub Pop was like the beginning of grunge in Seattle. They had all these really great bands. And I had been a fan of college radio because before MTV, college radio was in the US where you would hear these bands. I would hear bands like the Replacements and the Cramps and the Buzzcocks and all these like underground bands that hadn't really made it. And you listen to like a UMass, University of Massachusetts, or University of Boston universities would be playing these bands. Like a regular radio was not playing this stuff, but these college radio stations were. And I heard like REM, I heard like the Clash, I heard all these punk rockers in the late 70s, the early 80s, and I'm like, this is really awesome. And I was like, why is this not on TV? And then suddenly like MTV started playing some of it.
Yeah.
They still didn't play most of it until you really get to like Kurt Cobain and Nirvana. Then suddenly all that stuff started becoming mainstream. And like, because in the 80s, in the late 70s and the 80s, it was there, but kind of new wave kind of like overrode it. And then you get this rebellion against new wave and hair metal, and you get Nirvana, you get Pearl Jam, you get Soundgarden, you get Stone Temple Pilots, Alice in Chains, all those great bands. So that was a really good I think it's a really good inspiration to a lot of musicians like you and your band. That era of people who actually were playing.
Totally, And as I said, I'm from Barcelona, and there's not a big scene for music, for rock there. There's probably a lot of bands, but not a lot of clubs that will play the bands. But I got to see the Buzzcocks at least 4 times in Barcelona, and
awesome.
one time in London also. And this type of bands were big in Spain because it's not really far away actually. So they organizing the tours here, and they got really famous in Spain. But of course, anything that it was from United States was much more.
It's kind of like a reverse Beatles. It's like it seems like the grunge movement, kind of like we were able to do like an invasion, like an American invasion. Because everybody talk about like the British invasion, right? And it kind of took over. Like Motown had actually been really big, and then the Beatles and the Stones came and the Yardbirds, and they kind of like overrode that, which is kind of sad in a way because Motown was really good and still good. But it's just cool that we actually went back and like Hendrix was kind of like that. He was like an early like American invasion because he got big in Europe before he ever got big in the US. And so it's kind of cool to see that happen with grunge, that like the Buzzcocks, that you were like really like enthralled with them. That sounds cool. Yeah. Did you get into see any other like American bands like that when you were growing up?
Not really, because as I said, there were not many clubs in Barcelona that were bringing like famous bands, mostly just local or from Spain or like this. But here in Germany, I've seen many, many more. I mean, I said the scene here is incredible. Yeah. I'm super glad to be here and to have the opportunity to see so many bands. Last year, we've seen Alice in Chains. Even I mean, I only thought I will never be able to watch them. So
I was lucky. I got to see. I actually attended that Woodstock that's famous, where Green Day was throwing mud around, and Nirvana. I mean, not Nirvana, but like 9 Inch Nails and Trent Reznor played that night, and they were like unbelievable because it's like that really inspired me to see.
Yeah, I guess
like a band with synthesizers be as heavy as like Green Day or as heavy as any of the rock bands, and they had such a punk attitude, and that's a lot about what I do with the Ghost is like because I saw that, and I saw bands like Husker Du and the Replacements, and a lot of bands like New Order when they used to tour, and they were kind of more like Joy Division when Joy Division New Order came out in Joy Division, and Joy Division's a little more punk than New Order, but the early New Order was kind of riding that line, and I saw them when they were doing that, but it's always been a big inspiration to me to watch a lot of bands from all over the world. and like you said, like Germany has a really big scene, you know. And I've been interviewing German artists since 2018, and you know, a lot of people talk about, you know, artists from London and artists from other places, but the German scene's always been interesting to me. Even going back to what I talked about, like Bowie and Kraftwerk and Brian Eno, and that whole scene has always been inspiring to me. So the other thing I was wondering, like when did you decide you wanted to write your own songs? It's like there's one thing being a fan of grunge music. It's another thing to actually sit down and say, I'm actually going to write that. When did you like decide that you wanted to write it?
Well, I remember when I was listening to the bands that I enjoyed the most. I was always, you know, buying the CD or the tape and reading the lyrics, and I got really interested in it. And for example, I never wrote a song in Spanish,
Mm-hmm.
but I always tried to find the words in English to describe my feelings, to put them
That's
in a song.
interesting. That seems like English is like the universal music language, just because what happened with the Beatles and what happened with like pop and rock music. There's so many like American forms of music that a lot of artists from all over the world. I mean, I've talked to artists in Japan, in Korea, and you know, from Russia, and it's like it's, you know, English has become like the language of a lot of like a lot of genres within music. That, you know, in order to be able to be accepted in that genre, you kind of have to do it in English. Though I lived in Tokyo for a while, and I did like a lot of Japanese rock bands that actually, you know, speak, you know, do their music in Japanese. And I do find that sometimes the native language bands there's stuff that you miss if you translate it. But have you always just done it in English? Or have you done any like other different language versions of your band?
Just in English. Yeah, I didn't even try it in German because I don't know. It's like there's a lot of German bands who sing in English, in German. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
but I think you can see a big scene of punk rock being sung in your mother language, like in Spain. A lot of punk bands sing in Spanish or in Catalan, and in Germany in German. But once you drift a little from the punk scene, I think most of the bands sing in English, like a really big percentage. I don't know.
Because you want to tour Europe? Is that because you guys tour outside of Germany? Do you guys go to like London, other parts of Europe?
Well, that could be one thing. I mean, if you imagine yourself touring, then you don't always think if I write in my own my mother language, I will be able to get some kind of people from other countries, you know. If I'm in Spanish, I will probably not expect to be touring outside Spain. I don't know. It can happen. It happens to some bands. But I think it's this feeling of being more international, being able to reach everybody with your message, with your music. Yeah.
So were you guys ever did you ever come to the US and play?
No, not yet.
But you've done like festivals, like European festivals that were like outside of Germany, right?
We
or trying to get done.
Well, we're trying to get there for sure. Last year we came with our newest album, Overload, and it was the beginning of the Corona crisis, and we had like 11 gigs booked, and some of them were festivals inside Germany. But this was our what we thought it would be a step to contact with all the festivals and to be a little more into the scene, because once you were playing in more festivals, you get
picked up for other ones. Yeah, it's just kind of like last year was kind of a big downer for all the bands. Like I got a London booking agency like a month before the lockdown. and I was like, oh well, I'll get to go play like London. I'll get to play like, and they might have been able to get me to like Seoul or Busan or Tokyo, and then suddenly like I can't play anywhere but home. And so I understand that because I'm a working musician myself. So it's been frustrating like 2020, but is 2021 starting to look better? Are you going to be able to play shows?
I think so. I think this year, I think last year in summer, for example, in Hamburg and in Germany, was a little bit more open. There were some clubs opening, even with this kind of social distancing, like with the sitting places
Yeah.
and masks
Well,
and everything. But we were able to play in two concerts in summer that were not planned for the tour or anything. They just came like this, and now we're contacting some clubs again and seeing what's going to be possible. Some of the festivals that were booked for last year are going to be booked for next year.
yeah.
We're just waiting and taking whatever it comes because we really
Yeah.
love to play live again for sure.
Yeah, I actually started this thing like in July 16th through the 18th. I'm having a lot of the guests that have been on my program since 2018, and we're going to have like a Fam Electric Ghost like online festival. Like
Oh,
basically, it's all the guests that are willing to do it play live from wherever they can through this channel. And so we've got a bunch of bands lined up for that. It's going to be like 3 days that we're doing. So if anybody's into, I ask all the guests to come on if they're into it or not, or whether they have the capability, because not everybody's got the broadband or the webcam or the audio interface to be able to support live streaming. So again, I asked the question: Did your band try to do any live streaming performances, or do you guys like, well, that doesn't work for us?
we didn't try it yet, but we can talk about it. I mean, have to talk with the band, but I think this year we will be probably more open to new experiences, so everything can be.
Yeah, it's just a cool way to get to the fans, because some people have been doing them at different levels. They're doing like unplugged performances. Some people are able to like get their band in their home recording studio or like in a basement. And some bands are even able to get like TV studios or like venues to allow them to web stream from an empty venue. That's why I've seen a couple bands in the U.S. have actually been able to get venues to allow them to actually film and then stream out with no audience. But
Yeah,
so that's like been an alternative. Even in LA, you have some bands that are actually doing performances where people are in their cars in a parking lot, and then they're on a stage in a parking lot, and they set up the stage in a parking lot, and everybody's in their car. So it's like a drive-in performance.
nice. That's a really good idea.
Yeah, with LA, they've been doing it a lot. Other places are trying to figure it out, but LA is so car-oriented. It's like it's the land of the car, so it's like it's easier for them to figure out how to do that. Places like in the Northeast, New York, you could probably do that, but we haven't seen anybody do that yet. But yeah, I think it's just artists. We have to figure out ways to get to the audience. We had like a year where we're like, oh, we can't do anything, and then people said, well, you got to think about what you can do.
Yeah, exactly. Because there are many things that you can do. And summer last year, also we got the chance to record an extra song, like we call it like our summer song called Greedy. And it was also the thematic was a bit of a Corona crisis, and we did our DIY video, and we were kind of happy about it because at least you don't do the things that you had planned, but you come with new ideas and you get creative also in some other ways.
So have you guys had a hard time trying to record during Corona? I guess some bands that have their own recording, capability. A lot of artists I've talked to can like do it on their own digital audio workstations, their own DAWs. They got their own recording capabilities. But then a lot of bands still go to a traditional recording studio. And then Corona, that was kind of difficult because people were trying to figure out, well, how do you do that? So were you able to record? Like you said, you did that one song, but are you working on bigger projects like in this kind of situation? Are you able to write the music the way you normally do?
Well, as I said at the beginning of the pandemic, we had already the tour plan, so the album was already recorded.
Oh, so you're in a good position.
Beginning 2020. So luckily everything was recorded. So just the live performance was missing. And in summer we did this recording also, but with social distancing and in a place in a studio that we've been before. Uh, yeah, but I cannot imagine now. I mean, if you have somebody in the band who is a sound technician and has his own equipment and it's a good sound and he's a good sound technician, that's the best thing I think you can ever have. But if you don't, I think you will have to
Yeah, it's harder.
check the studios in your town or wherever you wanted to record and see when is it going to be able to record again.
Yeah, that's been, I have a lot of, I'm a kind of a bedroom producer. My whole stick is I'm a bedroom producer. I'm in my bedroom right now. But like everything I have is like here. I have all over the years, in my 50s, I just kept on buying gear. And I was in bands and people stopped showing up because they got married and whatever. So I
Yeah.
wanted to keep on going. So I just kept on building up my own collection of stuff. And I think a lot of artists like myself, excuse me, over the pandemic, we've been able to take advantage of the fact that everybody's kind of had to go into this kind of bedroom producing or home producing type of thing. And if you're not able to, then you're kind of like limited in what you can do. So a lot of people have been trying to learn. I've talked to bands that they had no interest in learning how to become a recording engineer, but the pandemic kind of forced it on them. So there's like, in order to get their music out, it's like, well, I can't wait. I got to get this stuff out. So they started taking courses or buying gear. So it's been interesting that a lot of people have actually taken this time because they can't tour. Like a lot of musicians, the only way we make money, right, is tour. Because like the streaming services, we love them because they get us out there, but they don't really pay. So like without touring, like what do you do? It's like, well, a lot of bands have actually, I'm going to learn new instruments. I'm going to work on this project that I wanted to, and I never had time because I'm always touring.
Mm-hmm.
So did you find that you had more time to actually work on your music?
Well, that's another problem because in Germany you're not allowed to meet more than two homes. Like,
Oh, that's bad.
and we were not able to rehearse a lot.
Oh, so they
Just
really locked you down.
yeah, but separately we met each other for some jams, and I think it gave us also an opportunity to just take a standby and relax a little because we were a little bit excited and nervous about this whole new album thing and getting into finding a lot of concerts, meeting a lot of people, using a lot of social media. And from one day to another, it's just like nothing, just relax, let's see what we have. And somehow you can start getting creative again without the stressful point of you have to really create now a product, the sound has to be ready and everything. So
Yeah, I think it's good to have that break time. A lot of bands took the time to kind of, could they, like as a writer, like I can sit and I can write lyrics without the band, right? I maybe work on a video project with a bunch of tools on my computer. So there's a bunch of things you could do that maybe aren't what you do with the full band. And you can even get into other things. I've heard some musicians got into acting. Some
sure.
musicians got into painting. And they got into like going outside and hiking because that's one thing you could do. Going wood. Yeah, I think it's just like everybody's had to try to deal with this pandemic in the way that they can. Though I've actually talked to a lot of musicians that are kind of like not rock bands, but like the DJ, hip hop, electronic musicians have had a little easier time because a lot of times they're like one person or two people doing everything. And so they've been able to continue to put out lots of material and even perform because they're kind of like solo artists in the first place. So have you thought about collaborating with other bands? Like sometimes I've seen bands like, well, okay, well, I'll guest play bass on somebody else's record, or I'll do top lines for somebody else's record. Have you done stuff like that?
We didn't yet, but everything is possible. I mean, we're all free. We're not a closed band that we're exclusively just playing in this format. Everybody's free to play in other bands. Our bass player Elena was also for a while playing in another band also. And if anything comes, I think we will get whatever we're interested in. That's for sure. the band will continue, but you can take other projects for sure.
Yeah, I think that's cool about music today, especially being an independent artist. Like when people were on labels, like sometimes a label, you'd have to get approval if you want to work with somebody, right? But like a lot of times, like you're independent, like, okay, if I want to go do something with a DJ, if I want to do something with a hip hop artist, if I want to do something with a country artist, I want to play bass on somebody's art, somebody's music in Nashville. I could do it, and there's nobody telling me from a label saying, "Well, you can't do that. You can't do whatever you want." And that's one of the cool things about today. But it's also like the hard thing, I think, is like when you're independent artist and you don't have a label like doing things for you, then you got to do all the promotion, you got to do all the booking, you got to do all the art. Everything is like up to you. And I guess if you're a type of person like you like to be hands on and control things, it's good. But if you're kind of person that's like, well, I don't know what to do, then it's not good.
No, we are well organized for this. Everybody has their own role in the band, and we're working together to bring everything that we need to social media, all the merchandise, everything, the video editing, everything that has to be done is been organized through us.
Do you guys do your own artwork for your merch?
This last album artwork was from a guy from Indonesia,
Cool.
and the first album artwork was from a friend of ours. The second also, they're all artists, independent artists, so we try to support them also here in the city. But for this last album, I don't know, we fell in love with this artist, and we thought, let's give it a chance.
Do you find that because you're in this kind of artistic community, it's easy to find like directors and artists and other people that you need to like be in to push a band? You got to have people to do your artwork for your merch, and people to direct your videos. Sound people. Is it such a scene in Hamburg that it's easy to get all the types of people you need to like run the band?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of contacts here in the city for all this. Also, all our videos have been done by the film production here in Hamburg, and I think there's enough designers, enough video makers, enough clubs, enough sound technicians that you can contact and find whatever you need. Actually, you can be really self-sufficient and just find people from Hamburg to do whatever you need. But sometimes, I don't know, if you fall in love with some type of artist, you also give it a chance.
Art is like a whole different thing. Like I actually had an artist that was in Greece, is like Chernobyl.com. I contacted him through the web, and this is the cool thing about the web. Like I'm in New Hampshire in the woods, and I got this artist from Greece to do a cover of my record, just because I was able to talk to him on Instagram. And like I saw something and I said, "Hey, I like what you're doing," right? And then I asked him to come on the podcast, and I interviewed him. And then we say, "Oh, hey, can you do the cover for my next record?" And then he did. And it was like, it's kind of like, okay, it's kind of like a barter thing. I interview you, give you exposure, and then you come work with me. Have you found that you're able to kind of barter sometimes with artists and stuff because you give them exposure, or because they get to be part of something maybe they weren't going to be part of, like an artist gets to get their work pushed because you're doing music, and then their art gets associated with their music, and it gets them in a different audience?
I don't know if it's exactly this, but we've participated in some projects that were more for a good thing, a good cause. Given our music for mixed sample of different bands, and all the funds will go to some charity.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Something like the opposite from what you're saying. Probably we're not making any money or getting any discount for just because they make something for us, and then we make some promotion for them. But mostly the opposite. But we're happy about it. I mean,
no, it's however you do it. I think what's cool about art and music is this kind of synergy between like, even acting, that
Mhm.
like we're all our creative people are kind of like, what I've seen is a lot of people are creating these collectives, and I'm not sure if that's what's going on in the U.S. scene. There's a lot of collectives of like-minded musicians or like-minded artists, and they try to like kind of help each other. And it's like they're not making any money a lot of times, but they're like, okay, we can all go to this venue with 10 different bands,
Yeah.
and then we can take over that club, and then the club lets us play because we have so much music that we can keep the club filled until like 2 in the morning. So they like the fact that all these bands come in, and then you actually create your venue by saying, hey, we're going to bring this scene. It's like a grunge scene or like an electronic Euro rack scene. You go to New York, you get 10 different bands that are doing experimental music, and one band might not be able to get in that club, but 10 bands coming together and saying, hey, we'll do this night, we'll do Friday nights all the time, then boom, then suddenly you get in the club.
Yeah, true. I mean, last year we were really happy to join. It's like a community for bands who have more. At least the half of the band is with women.
Cool.
Uh, so because we also realized that there's, of course, in this type of music like grunge, stoner, metal, alternative, there's a lot of men in the
Yeah,
scene.
yeah, you're not as many like there to get the Liz Fair, you get like Juliana Hatfield. You do have some American female kind of artists that are in like the kind of rock punk area, but like you said, most of the grunge bands are not known to be, like Sleater Kinney was like a Riot Girl band. They're probably one of the most famous like Riot Girl type of outfits. Or the Runaways going back to Joan Jett, but there's not a lot of examples of bands like yours.
Yeah, there's not
Really.
for us. I think L7 will be one of the biggest
Yeah, yeah, L7. Yeah, that's a good example.
examples. Um, PJ Harvey. I mean, there's a lot of examples, but they're not as there's
No,
not many as how many
yeah,
many
I
men.
don't think they've broken through. Like PJ Harvey's great. The Runaways were awesome. L7's awesome, but I don't think they ever got the reach of Soundgarden or Pearl Jam. And it's that's not fair. And the interesting thing is, a lot of times, like if people watch my podcast, like 80% of the artists I talk to are women, because I
Yeah.
feel that women artists need to get a platform, and they haven't been getting it. And so most of the artists I talk to are because I see there's a need in the music industry to not just elevate the men artists. I think a lot of the female artists need to be have exposure. That's kind of what I do with the show.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think that's great because last year, for example, when we found this community who were mostly booking concerts for bands with girls, or at least with a half, it was good because for us it was difficult to find live gigs to play that were taken a little bit serious. And of course, in Hamburg you can find more because you are from the city. But once you're trying to go somewhere else, at least in Germany, so
Mm-hmm.
you have like to prove like you are 100 times better than the other bands
Yeah,
who, just to get into the slot. And yeah, I think it's good to have this to create these communities that we just support to each other, and more festivals with girls, more festivals also, not just the bands with girls but also sound technicians,
yeah, yeah.
organizers, everything, because then it's from the top, from the organization, it's already a little more fair.
Yeah, you need more producers too, because like the problem I think in the industry that I've had, like kind of like I rail against, is like there's a certain set of producers that try to control the sound of any genre, and a lot of times there's not a lot of women involved in that, and I think that limits the perspective of what you hear, because if you're only getting one type of person that's getting into that control room, then they're putting their own spin on everything, and you're not hearing other people's you know take on it. And so I always encourage you know everybody to try to, get into production, get into becoming a music director, learn the techniques so you can own your sound, because otherwise other people are going to control and like spin what you sound like.
Yeah, I think it's just a question of time, actually, because before maybe it was not a job that you will consider like maybe I could do it, or I could be taken seriously on this. But I think slowly everything is changing, and I think if you encourage your friends to do it, and if you take them seriously, I think soon we will be seeing this a bit more equal scene in this in rock music, at least.
Yeah, I think it needs to be like a female-owned record label
Yeah.
that has a point of view that's like, okay, we're gonna have riot girl bands, we're gonna have EDM artists, we're gonna have rock grunge artists, but they're all gonna be female centered, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like Motown, was like, okay, here's an African American centered label. You got these hip hop centered labels. Maybe there needs to be like a female centric label to kind of say, okay, we understand the issues. Yeah, we understand your problems, and we're gonna work to kind of get past that. I think that'd be a cool idea. If a lot of the artists I've talked to are kind of into that, so maybe I can convince some of my podcast guests to maybe collectively put your heads together and come up with something.
It's a good idea, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because I think it's like I think it's that whole idea of the do-it-yourself. Like once you become a singer-songwriter, right, and you're not taking somebody else's lyrics, right, and once you decide I'm gonna go and I'm gonna play the guitar, I'm gonna play the keyboard, and then you decide, well, I'm gonna go and master it, or I'm gonna go and do it, all the production work. It starts to cascade. Like I think it becomes like. I think some artists, they get so into like, I want to control my sound because I want it to be what I want it to be. And you don't want to sound like somebody else. You want to sound like you. And I think once you make that decision that you're going to sound like you, then you tends to go that direction, which I think is cool. And I like to hear more people who sound like themselves. A lot of what I do is I talk to people who are in this tier where everybody's, not working with big known production outfits, that they're trying to do their own thing. And I find it just more enjoyable as a listener to listen to people who are trying new things. Because it just is to me, because there's so much stuff out there. I could hear like 100 Beyoncés,
Yes.
I could hear like 100 copies of any great band, and I'm like, well, I want to hear somebody do something a little new.
Sure. I mean, any band with more than one person have different influences. Like in our band, also we have from Queen to Clutch to hard rock, from Nirvana to like I said, L7, PJ Harvey. From also back to 70s. Everyone has their own history with music, and sometimes it's difficult to say what type of music are you playing. We always say like, well, a little this album maybe a little more this and this, but the next album I don't know. Whatever we're into, it's not.
Yeah. I think it's easy. And what's cool is like you kind of spin as a stoner rock grunge band, which kind of gives you a lot of room, because rock, you can go a lot of directions.
Yeah.
And in grunge, you can go a lot of directions. But like, it's not unheard of that you could decide, hey, maybe we do a little industrial version of the band, right? And maybe we throw a little hip hop vibe into it, right? Or you throw a little EDM into it. Not that you're going to do it all that, way, because you're a rock band. But like a lot of bands, like U2, was a big, rock band, and then they did a bunch of electronic albums. And bands will like to go and experiment. They go and change, because eventually, as an artist, I think you eventually want to evolve a little bit, because it's like, okay, well, I could keep on doing the same thing, or I could kind of push myself and do something a little outside the zone, and maybe my fans won't like it, but I kind of need to do it. Like, there's a lot of artists they'll lose a bunch of fans, not that they wanted to, but because they felt like they needed to do something different. and maybe it doesn't work, but it's kind of like a process. I think it's like, as an artist, as even a human being, sometimes you want to like push and see, can you go there or not?
Yeah, I think also, I think every band has their own type of sound. I think it's good to have like a type of sound that when somebody listens to you, whatever album it is, they can recognize you somehow.
Mhm.
It's like a type of vibe, but I don't like or I'm not a big fan of bands who album after album do exactly the same, just little variations of their own songs.
Yeah.
Then it is really monotone and boring. So for us, we have no problem in saying now we're playing this and next year we're playing something a little different. And yeah,
Hmm.
I think it's all about the vibe of the band and whatever style of music we feel like playing, we will.
Well, I think that's great. It's great that I've had you on the show. We are always happy to have artists on multiple times. We like to help you push like your latest projects. If you have a new album or EP or single that you're going to put out, you can always come back on the program. Like I said, we are trying to put together this online festival. So if you have any interest in that, you can contact me on the side. Um, and yeah, this podcast will be like, it's been live on my Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook channels right now. It will permanently be on those channels, and then we have a deal with Anchor FM and Spotify. So we go on to 11 audio podcast platforms after this. So there will be a Spotify version, audio only, and an Apple version, audio only, Radio Public, Overcast, a bunch of them will cascade within an hour. So we will send you the top 3 links for those. And we're just happy to have you on the program. We like to expose our audience to different music from all over the world, and we're glad that Tape Shapes with you took the time to come on the program.
Thank you so much for having us. We're happy to be here again. And yeah.
Yeah. We can always have the full band at some point. We do have the ability to share links. So in the future, if people are in different locations, we could have multiple people on.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for being on the program. We appreciate it. We'll send you the links as soon as we're ready with them, and hope that our fan base enjoyed this. Like, we do have your link up here. We created a special link for it, so it'll go right to your Spotify. Everybody can get all your music there. And we hope, and we also did a write up where some of your links are on the podcast write up itself. So thank you for being on the program.
Thank you. See you soon.
Bye bye.
Bye.